Hello YouTube, and here's a deck tech for you as we end 2019. Happy New Year for those that are celebrating New Year's this evening. We've got one in front of us. It's Big Red. If you like the deck tech or you want to see more of these, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what we can improve and bring to the channel here in 2020. The deck is in front of you. It is Big Red. The deck list is in the description below, so it's easy to access. And what it's doing is something similar to Skred in Modern, that being that it is using creatures and removal at the low end to punch in damage or remove things, and then getting to a mid-range to late game where it's going to put in threats that should just overwhelm our opponents. We're going to go through the creatures, the utility components, lands, and then a little bit of the top end and sideboard here in just a moment. But here's the list in front of you. Take it in just for a moment, and we'll go ahead and jump into those nuances of the deck and talk a little bit about what this deck does. So how does the deck get from early game to late game? The creature package that allows us to do that and sometimes steal a win very quickly is in front of you here. We have Soulscar Mage, we have Carry the Zev, our monkey creating token legendary creature, and we also have Rabblemaster, our goblin generating tokens. Noting that these are all 1, 2, and 3, we're going to curve nicely with these if we're not impeded by our opponent. And because we'll be curving 1, 2, and 3, and some of these do generate tokens, Embergleave has been attached to these as well as a utility artifact that's punching through a lot of damage. It allows for double strike, trample, and what's really nice about this artifact is that it can be flashed in at combat speed, which is a great thing for a red deck that's punching through creatures. You don't have to lay the artifact down and try to attach it and end up getting some removal picking off your creatures. These small creatures, they do push through a lot of damage, and this is going to give you enough damage to your opponent to get you to that late game where we want to be finishing the game off. Noting one thing here that's kind of not necessarily a aggro component is Soulscar Mage's ability. When you do damage to something, it's going to put counters on the creatures. And so that's actually going to shrink things. It could be flexed into the utility. The utility components are what we're going to go over next. And you'll see where that may help you as a more mid-rangey type effect. But this is your starting creatures. This is your aggro. This is your low end. Let's go ahead and look at some of those utility components next. All right, we have our utility components next. You'll notice a few creatures in here, which is interesting because I just talked a little bit about creatures, but I'm separating this into what works together. So here we have Wild Slash and Lightning Strike. These are obviously for removal. 2 and 3 damage is usually enough to get rid of some of those jump blockers at the beginning. But if our opponent doesn't have any of those, these are excellent ways to just burn out our opponent's face and or perhaps remove a few planeswalkers. The other side of this is the 2 creatures. These can obviously enable Embercleave in those pinches when you're going ahead and getting in, but they're also a really good utility piece. Bonecrusher Giant, I don't think it needs any introduction. Removing or burning to face, placing a creature down the following turn, and then them taking damage if they target it is an excellent piece. And then actually Chain Whirler against some of those ramping decks or X1 creature decks, it's a great board wipe. Not to mention that with one of our top end kind of helpful finishers, it actually can be just a board wipe in itself. Chain Whirler, being a 3/3 first striking body as well, is a threat that easily can punch through most of what is blocking at this point, this mid-range portion of the game. These are your utility components. Let's see how we finish the game up with some of our top end, and then we'll be looking at some lands and sideboard. Our top end finishers here, at this point in the game, we'll hopefully have done a considerable amount of damage. If not, we've probably cleared the board, fought 1-for-1 back and forth, and at this point, we're ready to stick a large threat. Unlike Burn or some low-end aggro deck where you're now going to be dropping a 1-drop or a 2-drop, Big Red here is trying to slam a big threat. We have Chandra, Torch Defiance, which is an excellent planeswalker, gets us extra card advantage if the game continues to go long, by also getting some damage in if we keep missing, say for example on lands or things we don't want to be casting. Torbran here is excellent if you have a board presence or a couple tokens. He suddenly just accelerates the damage. So when you play Torbran out, anything that is red is going to be doing some extra damage to extra damage. So you have a Goblin token swings for 1 plus 2 damage. And so they're obviously just chunking away damage. This also helps with some of the trading. If you have, say, an X3 creature blocking your tokens, this plus Torbrand makes that creature removed as soon as combat finishes. Finally, the big flyer, the one that shouldn't be ignored for sure, is Glorybringer here. Glorybringer is an evasive threat. It also has the Exert ability, allowing us to deal damage and remove perhaps a chump blocker or a larger sizable creature that's preventing, say, Rabblemaster tokens or Rabblemaster himself getting through, or some of our early game pieces. At this point, we're in the game, we're in the mid to late game, hopefully slamming these threats, finishing off the game, swinging for those last points of damage, and beating our opponent. Let's take a look at some of our lands that get us here, and a few utility pieces that we have throughout our lands. Here are the lands. We have a smattering of utility pieces here, and then we have 17 just generic mountains. Of course, pick the art that you like the most. Castle Embereth, Mutavault, and Ramunat Ruins. Each of these has their own utility within the deck. So we have the castle, which is going to pump our creatures. If we've got a board state, which we've gone very wide with, or perhaps we're playing a Torbrand down and need that just 1 extra point of damage with Torbrand, the token, and then the pump from the castle, we can do that and dump some mana into that. We have Mutavault, which is great in the event of a board wipe. We have something that's a little harder to get rid of from a sorcery speed. Now, if they have instant speed, they can easily pick this off, so be mindful when you activate this. You don't want to be losing lands here. And then finally, Ramunat Ruins, which is a really nice way to just kind of store up some damage. You can have 2/4 damage in your lands that you can activate over a couple courses of turns. So if you're getting roadblocked with creatures, and or if you're damaged, you just need a Wild Slash to get them to 4 damage and then activate some ruins over time. That could be just the end game there. Finishes it nicely. It's nice and stored up. It's all red mana except for a couple Mutavaults here, and it typically, because we're not running too many of the castles, always comes into play untapped, allowing you to do the curve of 1, 2, and 3, which is very critical for this deck to be curving out as finely as it can. Let's take a look at the sideboard. Sideboard's always in flux. Let's go ahead and take a look at that and see what we have currently available for the meta. All right, we've had to remove a few things here just real quick. Sideboard, we wanted to make it very clear. So what do we have here? We have some utility in the top left. We have a little bit of a creature package in the top right. And then I have a few utility pieces bottom left and bottom right. So let's go over what we have here. We have Abrades, Fries, and Mizium Mortars. If we're needing to remove artifacts or maybe a few extra creatures, perhaps we're kind of against a Gruul opponent or something that's being aggressive as well, but in the creature department, Abrades, Fries, and Mizium Mortars are hopefully going to get us there. The Fry is more specifically for those white aggro matchups or maybe Planeswalkers in the blue or white categories, and Mizium Mortars perhaps for green, for example, Green Devotion, or other larger green creatures, because the 4 damage actually can matter. Mizium Mortars also has this nice little like board wipe effect for one side versus the other, but this typically doesn't come into the cases very often. Scab Clan's an interesting one here. I'm wondering if this should be an Eidolon, but currently we have a Scab Clan in here. It is nice when it grows, and it can actually get through some of the smaller creatures very easily. It also doesn't have the clause of it has to be an efficient spell like Eidolon, where the Scab Clan just triggers off of any non-creature, which is kind of an important thing to note. Sometimes Pioneer has a larger casted spells, so there's that reason to be running that over an Eidolon, although an Eidolon would come out a little bit earlier. That would be a flex spot, and I would encourage you to play with an Eidolon or Scab Clan, whatever you may have in your collection. Alpine Moon's great here for something like for a Nykthos. It can also be here for the Lotus Field deck that we're seeing occasionally, or maybe just some other utility land that you just can't really deal with. Maybe a Lumbering Falls is a problem, or you don't want something else to be gaining an advantage. I've used this card sparingly when bringing it in, and it's probably your most flexible slot currently in the sideboard. Last pieces here are a Damping Sphere and Tormod's Crypt. The Tormod's Crypt's for things like perhaps Dredge, a Rally deck, or other decks that care about their graveyard, maybe a Phoenix deck that we've seen a few times. And Damping Sphere is for those decks that are trying to do just a few too many things at once. We might have the Kethis combo you might have heard of, where they're trying to loop something out of their graveyard. We may also have something that's trying to push a lot of extra mana. And Nykthos is a good example, or the Green Castle generating a lot of mana. Damping Sphere can slow those things down, and slowing down those big mana decks can sometimes be just enough for us. This is the sideboard, though. It obviously flexes with the meta. Take it with what you want. It's a great starting point. You can definitely flex a few cards here if you like. That is Big Red in Pioneer. I hope you've enjoyed yourself learning a little bit about what this deck is doing. It's taking over a few of the preliminaries recently here at the end of 2019. Hopefully you get to take the deck to your local F&M as well. Deck list is below, and it's an easy way to support the stream, just getting it through TCG, or of course trade at your local F&M for the pieces. If you're looking for the link, it should be just somewhere up here above me for the leagues. The thumbnail will look something like this. Poof. And there you go. Hope you've enjoyed this. Again, thumbs up. Let me know in the comments how we did. Let me know where I could improve, and hopefully we can bring some more of these in 2020 here on the channel. Thank you all, and have a happy new year, and we'll see you in the leagues on the stream next year. Take care.